Hello there.
There you are. How are you, Neal Schon? Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you too. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Neil. Are you sick and tired of doing media?
I've been doing it all day here because I'm trying to catch up. I was
I'm sure.
had like a flu virus like a week ago
Uh,
when we were supposed to knock this stuff out, and I just couldn't talk, and so I'm a little hoarse right now, but I'm still here.
and you're feeling good?
Yeah, definitely. I'm feeling a lot better.
Oh, that's
Uh,
good.
we just got home last night. We played in New York a couple nights ago and finished the second leg of our tour. And I was glad to get out of the heat, man. We've
Yeah,
been
I hear that it's been a crazy heat wave there and really high
just
humidity.
blistering hot, uncomfortable,
Uh,
sticky,
uh,
sweaty, 100 plus outside, rusted guitar strings by the end of the night. And just
Awful.
like, wow, hot,
Uh,
hot.
but the music went well. The audiences were
Yeah,
digging
very
it.
good. Yeah, we had a sold out show. We played by ourselves uh, at a shed, and we had like about 18,000 on a Monday night.
Uh, Pretty good. Pretty good.
Yeah,
Journey's got a big name. And it's a big new album that you're releasing. Congratulations on it. It's called Freedom. And it's simply awesome. It's your first one in some time, isn't it?
it's been 11 years since we've made new music, and after we realized that I realized that I was not really going to be able to go on tour for the last couple of years with the COVID and everything that was going on all throughout the world. I just decided that I don't care if anybody's interested or not interested in making a new record. This is something that I need to do,
Yeah.
you know. And I just started creating, and luckily enough, we had gotten through pretty nasty, lawsuit with a couple ex-members that weren't really interested in making new music. And at that time, I've known Narda Michael Walden for a long time, drummer extraordinaire and producer and songwriter, and worked with him and really enjoyed working with him. And goes all the way back to when he was playing with Mahavishnu Orchestra and John McLaughlin many years
Wow.
ago when he
Yeah.
opened up for Mahavishnu. And so I decided to choose Narda as a drummer to work with on a new project, and Randy Jackson. And they both worked together, and I worked with Randy for years. But it's just I knew it would click. And so we got to work, just Narda and I, and we started carving out a lot of songs and co-produced this album together and started experimenting a lot. And I really like the fact that him and I were playing live, even though we couldn't have everybody in the room at the same time because of the COVID. We're recording live drums and live guitar. And so it feels like everybody was in the room at the same time because of me cutting live guitar solos with him, even when there's no bass or
Yeah.
keys or anything. Just kind of hearing in my head, imagining what would be there and playing to that. And then I'd put on a rough bass. Afterwards, I put on some rough keyboards. Him and I would sing on it, come up with the choruses and verses and melody, and then I'd shoot it off to Jonathan, and he'd write lyrics and refine it a bit more, and then we'd shoot it off to Randy. Redid the bass, all the bass parts, and Jonathan redid the keyboards, and then I left Narda and Arnel alone to work on vocals, as that's Narda's forte.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, yeah.
So you and he were actually doing it physically together. You didn't have to do it remotely.
Yeah, we were in the same studio. We live like about 5 miles away from each other, and he has a great studio that I've worked in before in the past, and it was perfect for the times because I don't feel that it would be. I think that you can make a lot of different types of music, remotely, and cutting to a rhythm machine, later replaced by drums. But it's all, when you do something like that, it's all click, track, and everything gets a lot more sterilized,
Yeah, of course. Of
And
course.
for rock and roll, I was just like, it doesn't really have a place in my mind, you know, you need that kind of like, you know, where you're just kind of winging it, like a
Yeah.
song like Rain, Let It Rain, or Beautiful as You Are in the end after the drum solo. All that was like just loose chaos of him and I going at it, you know, in the studio,
Freewheeling.
like freelance, like the real bands used to do that I used to go see when I was a kid. My
Yeah.
favorite bands, you know, from the UK, whether it was the Who or Zeppelin or Hendrix or Cream or Jeff Beck and Rod Stewart, you know, they were all doing it. Nothing was ever the same night to night. So I was like, why can't you make a record like that? And, you know, if you have to use Pro Tools, later use it to chop it down to make it make sense. Like they used to cut the 2-inch tape, like, you know, Queen did. Many
Yeah.
stories I heard, you
Yeah.
know, from
Yeah.
Roy Thomas Baker about cutting the 2-inch tape,
Yeah.
everybody having a heart attack, you know. But
I remember those days well.
yeah, there was an engineer that we worked with Roy Thomas Baker, Jeff Workman, who's no longer here. And he was a wild Englishman. And he used to be juiced out of his head and gacked out of his head. And he would hold up the 2-inch tape like this with a razor blade, the master, and he'd go like that in the air.
And
And we're all,
everyone's hearts would drop. Yeah.
and then he put it together and it would be perfect. I'm like, it had to be some kind of good trick, but I swear to God, I watched him do it about 3 times and I never saw him pick up another piece of tape.
Neal, did you always grow up admiring that the sounds that were coming from the UK at the time?
Uh, did I grow up admiring what?
Yeah, I mean, when you were little, was it the bands from the UK that you admired most?
They, you know, when I was growing up, when I was very little, um, my folks were both musical. My father was a big band leader. My mom was a singer, like in a big band in the Air Force. That's where I was born, and so as a child growing up, you know, there was always music around the house, or they were rehearsing in the house with, you know, playing a lot of standards like Ellis, uh, Count Basie, Duke Ellington, Ellis Fitzgerald, you know, Miles Davis, all, you know, the greatest jazz
Uh-huh.
musicians, Stan Getz, my
Yeah.
dad, like, you know, so my ear got trained in music as a child, even before I started playing instruments. And I could differentiate what was what, who was playing, who was singing. Uh, and, you know, my dad played woodwind instruments. And so he taught me how to play some woodwind instruments. And I became kind of bored with that. Wasn't really my thing. And started messing around with piano a little bit. That never really stuck. When I heard the twang of electric guitar when I was about 9 years old, I got interested in playing guitar, you know, and it was really, I think the Beatles first, you know. My father bought me my first, you know, rock and roll record, and it was Rubber Soul. And, you know, I listened to that album. I thought it was a, you know, really cool album and very musical. And my
But
father,
you mentioned earlier that was the sounds of the Who and Jeff Beck and the like that were really smashing you at the time when you were growing up.
right. So, you know, I started playing at 10. Whatever got me started, got me started. By the time I was 12, I was really deep into the blues and I was listening to my favorite, you know, black artists. It was, you know, Albert King, B.B. King, who I later got to play with and meet, and Buddy Guy, Michael Bloomfield from San Francisco played with
Yeah.
Electric Flag, and, you know, Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and anyone else, you know, that I felt was a good blues guitarist. But those were the main guys I learned to play from, and those were my roots. And then after I had, you know, learned a lot of that note for note off of records, then the British invasion came in. And so then I started, you know, learning Jimmy's Page's style and Jimi Hendrix style and Eric Clapton's style and Jimmy Page's style of their interpretation of the Black Blues, you know. And that's what I became at that time. Before I started Santana, I was kind of like a kid that was making Cajun soup, and I kind of put it all in a pot and mixed it up, and that's what came out of me.
So how'd you get to be hired by Santana?
I was out and I was playing a lot, out and about in clubs, and managed to meet a lot of club owners that would allow me in, being so underaged, and
Yeah.
it was like illegal for me to be in there, but they allowed me to come in and just play and then out the back door. You know, don't drink water, don't drink anything, just come in and play and get off. Yeah, and so that's how I met the two, Santana guys. Was Greg Raleigh and Michael Shreve came in to see me playing in a little club in the peninsula.
And they asked you to join the band.
Well, what happened is I was playing with another band that night. Band There was one of the bigger bands in the peninsula, and they stayed around afterwards. And the club owner allowed everybody to stay afterwards. He, had everybody ushered out the door except for us, the band, and Greg Raleigh and Michael Shreve. And we ended up jamming to the wee hours of the morning. And I became very good friends with Greg Raleigh. He used to pick me up at high school, and I'd cut and I'd go hang out with him and
Amazing.
go play music at his father's house. And it just evolved.
Right. So, I mean, he obviously recognized your super talent and took you under his wing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How cool is that? And tell me about how you got Journey together in the first place. That was what year was that? 1973.
It was well, it really took form, right before 73. It was like still 72, the middle of 72. The Santana band had disbanded at that time. I'd made 2 records with them. I did Santana 3 and Caravanserai. And then, there was musical differences and people were having issues with each other, and it just kind of fell apart. And so I was looking for something to do at that time. And I started playing with Larry Graham and Greg Rico from the Sly and Family Stone Band. And we were going to do a power trio. And it sounded very interesting, and very new for what we were doing. It was like heavy blues, metal, funk in one, kind of like what Mother's Finest ended up being, but it was more in a trio form.
Oh.
A lot of improv going on with Larry Graham singing lead vocals, with his baritone voice. And so I had high aspirations and need to do that. And Larry kind of got cold feet at the last minute. He thought maybe it was a little too outside, and he wanted to do more of a straightforward R&B thing. And so he did Graham Central Station. And I ended up playing in that for a bit. And, learned quite a lot hanging out at his house in Oakland with Freddie Stones, Sly's brother. And learned how to play a lot of really stripped down funk, hanging right in it.
Amazing. Amazing. What, if I can just interrupt you just for a second, though, do you know how Sly is these days?
I don't. Last time I ran into him was years ago, and it was on the streets of New York.
Yeah.
And he was not looking good, but hopefully he's better than he is when I saw him.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah. I don't know, and it would have been amazing if he could have gotten it back together. It doesn't look like it's ever going to happen, but anyway, your question before that was how did Journey start? So there was a manager that had taken over really managing Santana at the time, because the manager that was there at the time had a serious drug problem. And so Herbie Herbert approached me, and he was Carlos Santana's guitar tech at the time. And he said, look, I'm going to start a management company. I want to wrap a band around your guitar playing. And at the time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I said, sure. And so
it's a pretty big compliment.
Yeah. Yeah, and we kind of learned together. He had Bill Graham teaching him all the ropes of management at the time, and we formed a band from that. But it was really Herbie and I from the get go, and he introduced me to the different musicians that he was thinking would work. That ended up, a lot of them ended up being, on the first Journey album.
Yeah. You were the baby of the group, weren't you? These guys were a whole lot older than you.
Yes, definitely, yeah.
Did you always feel like the baby in the band?
I didn't. I tried not to think about it too much because everybody was always crazier and a lot older than I was. And I got to tell you, I mean, Santana was a really wild band. You know, they were like nuts. It was off the hook crazy. I mean, uh, just, wild. And
Did you join in the wildness, or did you keep yourself a little apart from it?
I was, I kept myself pretty far from it for the longest period. Dabbled in it a little bit, but I was still very young and very shy,
Yeah.
and kind of tried to steer
Yeah.
away from it.
I can
Uh,
imagine.
yeah.
And so once Journey got going and you had your mainstays in the band, you started getting really successful really fast, didn't you?
We Journey, when we first started, we were always like the San Francisco favorite band, and we were known as, in San Francisco at the time, there was no jam bands, there wasn't Fish and all these spin-offs like bands like the Grateful Dead. It was just the Grateful Dead that were really doing that kind of jam thing. And then there was Santana, that was a different type of jamming thing, that was a bit more Latin rock and
Uh-huh.
fusion kind of mixed together with a lot of percussion, which was really interesting to me. Um, but at the time, we were known as the jam band, the fusion jam band on steroids from San Francisco. And we could basically play in front of anybody and really pretty much blow them off the stage, from sheer energy. And, San Francisco loved it, just loved it. They loved it so much that when we first introduced Steve Perry and we played our first show and introduced him and he came out on stage, it was met with great resistance. Like,
Really?
what are you guys doing? But in reality, it opened up so many doors because it went out of that jam band thing that we still can do, but it got us onto the radio, which made our lives a lot easier because we really worked our asses off. We were, 3 years, like 10 months out of a year on tour, to 11 months of every year, the first
Wow.
3 years, traveling around in a station wagon, you know, and
Wow.
basically just barely getting to the town we're going to play, jumping out of the car, jumping on stage, jumping back in the car, and bolting and going on to the next city. And until we met, we opened up for everyone. We opened up for Kiss, we opened up for Thin Lizzy, we opened up for Cheech and Chong, we opened up for everyone you can possibly imagine, you know? And when we finally met Leonard Skinner, that was the band that really, their audience really took to us. We started playing in front of these huge outside stadium crowds and started getting over with them before there was Steve Perry. And we were getting like three encores, strong encores in front of them. And so I was always so thankful to those guys. And I felt like we were on the verge of like busting wide open,
Yeah.
even with where we started before all the changes
Right.
that we made. Um,
Why did
but,
you decide to bring Steve Perry in?
at the time, our manager, Herbie Herbert, uh, he came to us and he said, look, Columbia Records at our time was our label. They're going to drop us unless we get a new front man and we get anything on the radio,
Uh-huh.
and suggested Steve Perry, and Greg and I listened to it, and to be honest, we were like, he sounds great, but I don't think it's what we're doing, you know. And so, you know, we reconformed and made it work. I got together with Perry, and you know, we had immediate writing chemistry, him and I. You know, we wrote patiently in about 10 minutes, within just sitting in, you know, a room with an acoustic guitar and him singing. And we continued like that throughout our first 3 albums together.
Huh. It turned out to be a really good move, didn't it? You've had 18 top 40 singles over the course of your career. Talk to me about Don't Stop Believin'. That's been your biggest #1 hit, hasn't it?
Don't Stop Believin', uh, you know, just came about after Greg Raleigh decided that he needed a break. And he'd been, you know, on tour for so many years. He wanted to start a family, and he just had enough of the touring life. Uh, you know, we had been playing with the Babies, and Jonathan Cain I had met, and you know, I suggested bringing Jonathan in at that time uh, because I felt that he was a good keyboard player, and he also played guitar. Had not written with him yet, but you know, was one of the songs that we wrote together when we got together and started compiling material for Escape.
How did it feel that just exploded? What did that feel like for you?
It wasn't a surprise to me because I felt at the time when I heard the song, I felt that it was going to be much bigger than it actually became at the time when it was first released. And so I thought it was one of the best songs on our album, and that it would be the biggest immediately. And it wasn't until many years later. But now it is. And so, you know, I guess I was ahead of time. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's just made a whole comeback, hasn't it?
Yeah. 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 Never really went away. You know, it's always been a hit when we play it live, like a lot of our tunes.
So there were a number of lineup changes. You and Cain started collaborating with people like our very own Jimmy Barnes, with Michael Bolton, and as you mentioned, John Waite from the Babies. That brought about a whole lot of hit stuff too, didn't it?
Absolutely. They were all great collaborations. The one with Jimmy Barnes was especially great. You know, I loved working with Jimmy, and you know, that song. There's many songs off that album that I played on. You know, Freight Train Heart, that became a classic album for him, and Too Much Love Ain't Enough. Uh, Funny story, you know. I played on that song, and uh, just did some really stripped down R&B blues, you know, on the cleaner side. And I got a call one day after the single was released, and it was from my good friend Eddie Van Halen and Sammy Hagar. And they were in the back of a limo going to one of their own gigs. And they both called me and said, "Hey, man, I just heard this song. They were talking about you and Jimmy Barnes on the radio, and that was you and Jimmy. It sounded freaking amazing." And so, you know, that song kind of took everybody by storm in the United States. And many good songs on that album, but as well as the other projects that you brought up, Bad English, you know, we had it churned out some really great stuff. The poppier stuff, I was not so into the rock and bluesy side of that. John Wade and I are still talking about maybe a continuation of blues, a heavier blues rock album, and
Oh
not
yeah,
pop
please do
rock.
it, guys. Please do
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It's there. It's sitting there for him and I, for real, because that's really where both of us come from. And the other band you mentioned, what was it? It was Jimmy, uh, Bad
Uh,
English, and someone else.
Yeah, I can't even remember. We'll skip it, don't worry. I'm chatting with Neal Schon from Journey. Neal, what are you most proud of in your rather lengthy career?
God, I'm
Which
proud
piece
of
of
it all.
music? You're proud
I'm
of it
proud of
all?
it all. Honest to God, there's nothing that I would change. You know, It's all different. When I listen to everything that I've done, whether it's a solo album that's completely off the cuff, or any Journey record or any Santana material, everything that I've ever played on, it's all different. Even funny, when we were recutting Dock of the Bay with Michael Bolton, with Randy Jackson again, and Jonathan, I had Steve Cropper in the studio next to where we were recording it, the gentleman that wrote it
Yeah.
with on the original album. And I was like nervous as hell. And I was like, wow, I wonder if this guy's gonna like this version of it, because I'm playing a solo on it. And he came in, he loved it. So Otis Redding, I think that was very good too. It all has merit to me, and it all
right.
helped me evolve to where I'm at now.
Yeah, of course, it's all part of the journey, as they say.
Yeah, definitely.
So, why has it taken you so long? Why 11 years between albums?
Some guys in the band just didn't want to, they didn't care about making new music. And most of them are gone now. But,
Is that a factor of the lifestyle?
Is that a factor of what?
Of the lifestyle they were living?
I think it's just a factor of laziness, and just being set, in your laurels of like relying on what you've already done. I mean, sure, a band of our stature that's had the success and sold 100 million records, you can do nothing but play that catalog for the rest of your life. But you know what? I'm like I consider myself a true musician. And so I always need to be moving forward,
Yeah.
regardless of what type of music it is. There's only two types of music to me. It's good and bad, and it doesn't matter if it's Journey, doesn't matter if it's, like really avant-garde jazz, doesn't matter if it's blues, whatever it is, it's either good or bad.
Yeah.
And I have all that stuff in me that can come out at any moment. So I always need to move forward.
Well, we're very glad you did, because this new album is really great. It's called Freedom. It's, as you said, the first one that you've released in 11 years. You've played guitar on it, you've written on it, and you've produced it. Tell me a little bit about your favorite tracks.
Oh wow. I love this whole album as a, just as a statement.
What's it saying as a statement?
The statement is that there was nothing in mind going in except trying to make good music. And my statement was that I wanted to encompass everything from the beginning of Journey for myself, because it'll be my 50th anniversary next year, to now, where I've come as a musician. And I think there's bits and elements of everything we just spoke about, regardless of what artist. There's some bluesy rocking stuff. There's some funky, filthy, funky, like hard rocking stuff that we've never done before. And then there's some ballads that start off like very soft, but end up completely ballistic, like Whoish, and with the looseness of, Electric Ladyland, Jimi Hendrix, or, The Who, during Tommy.
Yeah.
And like a song like Beautiful As You Are that ends up the album. Those, I wrote those bits in pieces. It became like a suite, but I wrote the first bit first, the second rocking bit second, and then, I said no to play a drum solo. And then I kind of just winged it with him, and I take it out in the chorus and wrote the bass to go with the guitar later. Kind of like what I, saw with Townsend and the Who, that nothing was locked down and set in stone when we recorded this album, because it was just guitar and drums. And then I played the bass later, and then Randy later played, a lot of the parts that I created, but played it better.
So do you want people to listen to it in the order that it's put down?
Absolutely. That, I think, well, you can listen to whatever order you choose. I actually had a different order that I initially came up with, and it was much harder hitting from the get-go. You know, I wanted to come with more of the baseball bat upside the head, you
Knock it
know.
out of the field.
Yeah, exactly. And from the get-go, because, you know, I wanted to start out with Holding On, because I felt like it was so off the wall that people would hear it and go, wow, that's interesting. That's a Journey. That's a Journey record. And they want to hear the rest of it. But, you know, the bands are about compromise. Jonathan wanted to come from more of a familiar place, like Don't Stop Believin started Escape, you know, and that's what happened, you know. We just
So
regroup.
yeah, I hear you. So it's a little difficult to categorize Journey these days as a result of this new album, isn't it? We can't pigeonhole you anymore. You've kind of exploded outside of the four walls.
You know, I don't think that we've ever been able to pigeonhole, you know, I mean, it's something I think that critics didn't like about us, you know, that they couldn't put their finger on it and say, they're just doing this, it's been done, blah, 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 blah. Instead, they kind of tried and they did pigeonhole us as being a soft rock act. And we're like everything but, you know, that live. I mean, we do have soft music that's made it on to soft AC radio, which just means you're going to sell millions more, you know, of records altogether. But, you know, we never ever were soft live. And actually, you know, I refused to be. I was like the rocker in the band. I was like, we need to keep this rock thing going, and it needs to be off the wall, and it needs to have that adrenaline. You know, otherwise, you know, you can have the other stuff, and you might have a cute little single over here, but you're not going to sell tickets live.
Yeah,
And we
right.
wouldn't be selling out, you know, like arenas again and going into stadiums again at this point in our career with that if we weren't rocking. You know, we totally, you know, kicked it out of the park this year, you know,
Yeah,
on stage
sure
live.
did. And 50 years Neal Schon for you next year. Is that going to see that'll be a touring year also?
Absolutely, yeah. You know, we have it. Actually, we have quite an agenda that, you know, we're planning for next year, 24 as well. And we plan on coming abroad and playing there,
Good.
playing in Europe. And so I got to bolt here though, because, you know, I'm being told that I have one more interview to do.
Okay, I'm
This is
letting you
my
wrap up. That was my last question. I know you've been really generous with your time. Neal Schon, great chatting with you. Thanks for your time and congratulations on the album and your 50 years of music. You're an awesome musician.
Thank you, Sandy. Appreciate it. So
Look
hopefully
forward to
see
seeing
you
you
in
down under.
Australia. Yeah,
Indeed.
thank you.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for your time. Bye now.